I'm 83 years old, and I need to tell you something that took me 8 decades to understand. I never made a single important decision for myself. Not one. Every choice, every turn, every path I took, I looked around first to see what people expected, what they'd approve of, what would make them nod and smile and say, good choice. And you know what I have to show for it? A life that looks perfect on paper and feels empty in my chest. My name is Daisy Whitmore. I'm 83 years old, and 3 months ago, I was cleaning out my sister's house after she passed away. Dorothy was 79. Lung cancer, fast and brutal. We had 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. In her bedroom closet, I found a box of letters. Letters she'd written but never sent. Letters to our parents, to her ex-husband, to friends who'd disappointed her. And right there, folded at the bottom, was a letter addressed to me. It was dated 1987, 38 years ago. In it, she told me everything. How she'd watched me marry Robert even though she could see I didn't love him. How she'd watched me quit teaching even though it was the only thing that made my eyes light up. How she'd watched me move to Connecticut because that's where Robert's family expected us to live, watched me join the country club I hated, watched me pretend to enjoy bridge games and charity luncheons and everything else that came with being Mrs. Robert Whitmore III. Maggie, she wrote, you're living someone else's entire life. And the worst part is you don't even see it. You think you're being good, being appropriate, being what you should be, but you're disappearing, and I don't know how to tell you without you getting angry at me for not understanding. She never sent it because she was afraid of what I'd think. She was afraid of my disapproval, just like I spent my whole life afraid of everyone else's. I sat on her bedroom floor with that letter in my hands, and I understood, really understood, for the first time what I'd done to myself. Let me take you back. I was 22 years old in 1963 when I graduated from Smith College with a degree in English literature. I wanted to teach high school English in the city. I wanted to work with kids who needed someone to believe in them, kids who thought Shakespeare and Steinbeck weren't for people like them. My father was a surgeon. My mother came from old Connecticut money. At my graduation dinner, when I told them my plan, my mother put down her fork and said, Daisy, dear, you didn't go to Smith to teach in an inner-city school. Just like that. Not, that's not safe. Not, are you sure? Just, you didn't go to Smith for that. Translation, we didn't pay for Smith so you could embarrass us. My father said, there are perfectly respectable teaching positions in Greenwich. Or New Canaan. Places where your degree would be appropriate. I remember that word. Appropriate. So I applied to 3 private schools in Connecticut. Got offered positions at all of them. Took the one at Choate because it sounded most impressive when my mother told her friends. I taught there for 2 years. The kids were fine, smart, privileged, mostly going through the motions until college. It was fine. Everything was fine. But I'd drive past the public high school in Bridgeport on my way home, and I'd think about the teachers there, about the kids there, about the job I'd actually wanted. And I'd think, maybe after a few years, maybe once I've proven myself. Maybe once my parents see I'm a good teacher. So I waited. When I was 25, I met Robert at a Christmas party in Greenwich. He was 31, a lawyer at his father's firm, exactly the kind of man my mother had been hoping I'd meet since I was 16. Robert was handsome, polite. He came from the right family, went to the right schools, belonged to the right clubs. On our 3rd date, he told me I was exactly the kind of woman he'd been looking for, intelligent enough to hold a conversation at dinner parties, but not so career-focused that I'd neglect a family. That should have been a red flag the size of Connecticut. Instead, I thought, he thinks I'm intelligent. He appreciates me. We dated for 8 months. He proposed at the country club in front of both our families. Everyone clapped. My mother cried. His father shook my father's hand like they'd just closed a business deal, which, in a way, they had. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't ask myself if I loved him. I didn't ask myself if I wanted this life. I didn't ask myself anything except, is this what I'm supposed to do? The answer was yes. So I said yes. We got married in June of 1967. I was 26 years old. 200 guests at the Greenwich Country Club. My dress was the one my mother chose. She said the one I liked made me look too informal. The honeymoon was 2 weeks in Europe, the itinerary planned entirely by Robert's mother because she knew the best places. I didn't object to any of it. 6 months after the wedding, Robert's father said it would look better for the firm if Robert's wife wasn't working. It suggests you need the money, he said, which reflects on Robert. I quit teaching that December. I told myself it was temporary. Once we had a house, once we were settled, once Robert's father retired and it didn't matter what things suggested. So I waited. We bought a house in Darien in 1969. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a lawn that required a service. It was the house Robert's parents thought we should buy. Good bones, good neighborhood, good investment. I'd wanted the smaller Cape Cod by the water. The one with the sun porch where I could read. The one that felt like a home, not a statement. But Robert said, Maggie, be practical. This house makes sense. So we bought the house that made sense. Our first daughter, Caroline, was born in 1970. Elizabeth came in 1972. Both girls were beautiful, healthy, easier babies than I deserved. I loved them immediately and completely. But here's what happened. I looked around at the other mothers in Darien, and I saw what they did. How they dressed their children, where they sent them to preschool, what activities were appropriate. I joined the Junior League because that's what the mothers did. I hosted playdates at the right times with the right families. I enrolled the girls in ballet and piano and French lessons because those were the approved activities. At night, when the girls were in bed, I'd go to the bookshelf in our living room, the one Robert's decorator had filled with leather-bound classics that no one read, and I'd pull down my old copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, the one I'd taught at Choate, the one I'd planned to teach in a city. I'd sit there running my fingers over the pages, and I'd think, someday, when the girls are older, when I have time, when it makes sense. So I waited again. I was the success story. I actually believed that. When I turned 60, Robert threw me a surprise party at the club. 80 people I barely knew. A pianist playing songs I didn't care about. A cake that said, Happy Birthday, Daisy, in script that looked like calligraphy, but felt like a forgery. Everyone gave speeches about what a wonderful wife and mother I was. What a pillar of the community. What an example of grace and dignity. I stood there smiling, and I felt like I was attending a funeral for someone I'd never met. That night, after everyone left, I sat in our bedroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I was 60 years old. I'd been married for 33 years. I'd been living in this house for 31 years. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a choice that was mine. But what could I do? This was my life. These were my commitments. This was who I was. So I kept going. Robert retired at 65. We were supposed to travel Europe, Asia, South America, all the places the other retired couples went. But Robert had a stroke 3 months after his retirement party. Not massive, but significant enough. Left side weakness. Speech difficulties. Early dementia setting in shortly after. I became his caretaker. The girls called twice a month. They were busy with their own lives now. Caroline was a hospital administrator in Boston. Elizabeth was a corporate lawyer in New York. Both married, both with children, both with the same kind of structured, approved lives I'd taught them to live. They'd ask how I was doing. I'd say fine. They'd ask if I needed anything. I'd say no. What would I have said? That I was 71 years old and just realizing I'd never lived a single day for myself? That I was taking care of a husband I'd never loved because leaving him now would be inappropriate? They had their own lives to worry about. Robert died in 2018. I was 75 years old, 51 years of marriage. At the funeral, everyone told me what a devoted wife I'd been. What a long, happy marriage we'd had. What a blessing it was that I'd been there for him at the end. I accepted their condolences and felt nothing but relief. That should have been my wake-up call. It wasn't, because even then, even at 75 years old, I kept asking the same question, what will people think? If I sell the house, what will people think? If I move somewhere else, what will people think? If I finally admit I wasted my entire life, what will people think? So I stayed in the house. I kept playing tennis on Tuesdays. I kept attending the charity functions. I kept being Mrs. Robert Whitmore III, even though Robert Whitmore III was dead. I waited for permission to live my own life. And then Dorothy got sick. 6 weeks. That's all we had. 6 weeks from, I'm not feeling well, to, there's nothing more we can do. I moved into her apartment in Portland for those 6 weeks. I slept on her couch. I cooked her meals. I read to her when she couldn't sleep, Mary Oliver, Rumi, Wendell Berry, all the poets she loved. One afternoon, about a week before she died, she was lying in bed looking out the window at the rain. She'd always loved rain. Do you know what I'm proudest of? She asked. What? This life. This messy, imperfect, not impressive to anyone life. It's mine. Every single piece of it. She looked at me then, really looked at me. Can you say that, Maggie? I couldn't answer. She reached for my hand. You still have time, she whispered. Not much, but some. She died 3 days later. And 1 week after her funeral, I found that letter. Sitting on her bedroom floor, I read it 3 times. Each time, I felt something crack open in my chest. She'd seen it. She'd seen everything. She'd watched me disappear into someone else's expectations for 60 years, and she'd tried to tell me, and I'd been too busy being appropriate to listen. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. Then I went downstairs to Dorothy's bookstore. The new owner, a young woman named Sarah who Dorothy had trained, was at the counter. Can I help you? She asked. I'm Dorothy's sister, I said. I used to teach English. A long time ago. Before I stopped. Sarah smiled. Dorothy talked about you. She did. She said you were the smartest person she knew. She said you could have done anything. Could have. Past tense. Do you need volunteers? I asked. Here. At the store. Do you need anyone to help with recommendations, or book clubs, or anything? Sarah looked surprised. Actually, yes. We're starting a community reading program, teaching reading skills to adults who never learned properly. Dorothy was going to run it, but now. I'll do it, I said. Don't you live in Connecticut? I'm selling my house, I heard myself say. I'm moving here. I hadn't planned to say it. I hadn't decided it. But the moment the words left my mouth, I knew they were true. Sarah's eyes went wide. Really? Really? For the first time in my entire life, I'd made a decision without asking anyone's permission. It felt like jumping off a cliff. It felt like learning to breathe. That was 3 months ago. I put the Darien house on the market 2 weeks later. Caroline and Elizabeth called immediately, their voices tight with concern. Mom, are you sure? This is very sudden. Have you thought this through? What will people think? What will people think? There it was. The question I'd taught them to ask. The question that had ruled my entire life. I don't know, I told them. And I don't care. They didn't understand. They thought I was having some kind of breakdown. They suggested I see someone. Take some time. Not make any rash decisions. They used all the same words that had kept me trapped for 8 decades. But this time, I didn't listen. Then I walked to the bookstore. I teach reading 3 afternoons a week. My students are adults who slipped through the cracks, people who learned to hide their struggles, who felt ashamed, who thought it was too late to learn. I understand them completely. Last week, a 62-year-old man named James read his first chapter book cover to cover. When he finished, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I never thought I could do this, he said. You always could, I told him. You just needed someone to show you it was possible. I was talking to him, but I was also talking to myself. I'm 83 years old. I wasted 60 years of my life asking permission to exist. 60 years. I can't get them back. I can't redo my 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s. Those years are gone. Every single choice I didn't make for myself, every single day I spent being who others wanted me to be, gone. And here's what haunts me most. Nobody actually cared. All those people whose approval I was so desperate for, most of them aren't even in my life anymore. The friends from the country club? I haven't heard from a single one since I moved. The people who came to Robert's funeral and told me what a blessing our marriage was? They've forgotten I exist. I spent my entire life contorting myself to fit their expectations, and they didn't even notice when I left. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. The people whose approval you're seeking are too busy seeking someone else's approval to actually care about your choices. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, about their own image, about what other people think of them. It's an endless, exhausting cycle of external validation, and everyone's too dizzy to realize nobody's actually watching. So let me tell you what I wish someone had told me when I was 22 years old, standing at my graduation dinner, about to let my parents' expectations override my own dreams. The approval you're seeking will never come. Not because you're not good enough. Not because you haven't earned it. But because the target keeps moving. Because there will always be another expectation, another standard, another version of yourself that's more appropriate, more acceptable, more right. You think, if I just do this one thing the way they want, then I'll have earned the right to do what I want. But that moment never comes. You think, if I just prove myself first, then they'll respect my choices. But proof is never sufficient. You think, if I just wait until the timing is right, until everyone's comfortable, until it makes sense to everyone else, then I can live for myself. But that timing never arrives. Because living for external validation is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You pour and pour and pour, and it's never full. It's never enough. You're never done. And one day you wake up and you're 83 years old, and the bucket is empty, and so are you. I know what you're thinking. I can hear the objections because I made them all myself. But I have responsibilities. I can't just do whatever I want. You're right. You do have responsibilities. But responsibility to others doesn't mean abandoning responsibility to yourself. It doesn't mean pretending your own needs and desires don't exist. It means finding a way to honor both, and it starts with admitting that your life matters too. But what about my family? Won't this hurt them? Maybe. Maybe it will be uncomfortable. Maybe they won't understand at first. But you know what hurts worse? Watching someone you love slowly disappear. Watching them perform a life instead of living one. That's what I did to my daughters. I taught them that women disappear into other people's expectations. And now they're doing the same thing. But I've already invested so much time in this path. Isn't it too late to change? This is the most dangerous lie of all. It's the one that kept me trapped longer than anything else. The sunk cost fallacy, the idea that because you've already wasted time, you might as well keep wasting it. No. Every day you continue living someone else's life is another day lost. The time you've already spent is gone. But you still have today. You still have tomorrow. You still have whatever time remains. I have maybe 10 years left if I'm lucky. Maybe 15 if I'm very lucky. That's it. But these years, these final years, are mine. For the first time in my life, I wake up and ask myself what I want to do today. Not what I should do. Not what would look good. Not what others expect. What do I want? Sometimes the answer is simple. Read on the porch, teach at the bookstore, make soup for dinner because I like the smell of soup simmering. Sometimes it's bigger. Reach out to Caroline and Elizabeth and tell them the truth about my marriage, about my life, about what I want them to know before I die. But every single day, I'm making choices that are mine. And you know what? I'm not perfect at it. After 80 years of asking permission, I still sometimes catch myself looking around for approval. I still sometimes wonder what people think. But now I notice it. I see the pattern. And I choose differently. That's what freedom looks like at 83. Not perfection. Just awareness. Just the daily practice of choosing yourself. Here's what I want you to understand. External validation is an addiction. It feels good in the moment. Someone approves of your choice. Someone says you did the right thing. Someone validates that you're acceptable. That hit of approval feels like oxygen. But like any addiction, you need more and more of it to feel okay. And you'll sacrifice anything to get it, your dreams, your authentic desires, your actual life. And here's the cruel irony. The more you seek it, the less you respect yourself. Because deep down, you know you're betraying yourself. You know you're lying about who you are and what you want. And that knowledge eats at you. I spent 60 years feeling vaguely uneasy, vaguely dissatisfied, vaguely wrong. I couldn't name it. I couldn't identify the source. I just felt off somehow. It was because I was living a lie. Your body knows. Your soul knows. You can perform the appropriate life perfectly, and some part of you will always know it's a performance. So here's my urgent plea to you. Stop performing. Stop waiting for permission. Stop asking if your life is okay with everyone else. Your life is yours, not your parents', not your spouse's, not your children's, not your friends', not society's. Yours. And you get one. One life. One chance. One shot at being yourself instead of everyone's idea of who you should be. I wasted mine. I waited until I was 83 years old and my sister was dead to finally live authentically. Don't be me. If there's something you want to do, teach in the city, start a business, end a marriage that's slowly killing you, move to Portland, learn to paint, quit the job that pays well but drains your soul, admit you're gay, become a poet, live in a tiny apartment with wind chimes. Do it. Not someday. Not when the timing's right. Not when you've earned enough approval. Now. Because I promise you, when you're lying in bed at 80-something years old, you won't regret the disapproval you earned by living authentically. You'll regret every single day you spent seeking permission to exist. The choice is yours. But for God's sake, make it now. Before you run out of time like I almost did. Before you wake up one morning and realize you've spent your entire life living for an audience that wasn't even watching. I'm teaching reading today at 2 o'clock. Then I'm going to the bookstore's poetry reading tonight, something I never would have done as Mrs. Robert Whitmore III because it wouldn't have been appropriate. Tomorrow, I'm having coffee with Sarah, and we're planning a women's literature discussion group focusing on books about women who chose themselves. Books I wish I'd paid attention to 50 years ago. Next week, I'm taking a painting class. I've never painted in my life. I'll probably be terrible at it. And I cannot wait. This is what life feels like when you stop asking permission. It feels like waking up after an 80-year nap. It feels like meeting yourself for the first time. It feels like coming home. Share this with someone who's living for everyone else. Tell them Daisy said it's not too late. Tell them to stop waiting. Tell them their life is happening right now, and external validation is a trap that will steal every moment if they let it. Leave a comment telling me one thing, just one thing, you're going to do for yourself this week without asking anyone's permission. Subscribe if you want more brutally honest conversations from someone who learned everything the hard way. And whatever you do, please don't wait as long as I did. You deserve to meet yourself before you die. Trust me on this. I'm 83 years old, and I finally know